Welcome to session number 20 of FileMaker Group Therapy for Citizen Developers. My name is Tim Jones. In today's session, we're going to dive headlong into the sticky issues surrounding importing and exporting data, like why is it never simple? And what about field validation rules? How do they apply when importing data? Can I import images? What if my source data does not have primary key values? And how do I fill those foreign key fields with the right ID numbers? Well, in the following demonstration, I'm going to employ several easy yet powerful techniques to overcome these obstacles. We will create temporary fields, temporary relationships, write calculations, and use the replace field contents command to enter the missing data after importing that will solidify relationships between records and make up for what your Excel data did not have. In some cases where it makes the job easier, we'll take the reverse approach and write lookup functions in Excel to create the missing data before importing into FileMaker. So let's get right into it. Here's our animal care database that we've been developing over the course of these sessions. And here's some source data that we'll be pulling into it. Let's say that we're going to start with some customer data. We've got this CSV file called customers.csv. I'm going to open it up into a text editor, a plain text editor, like TextEdit. CSV stands for comma separated values. CSV is a very popular, very commonly used format for passing data between environments like spreadsheets and databases. You can see that a comma separated value file is not pretty to look at to the human eye, but it has everything that it needs to distinguish the columns and rows of data. Each row is its own paragraph. The first row is, in this case, and in many cases, called a header row, where it includes field names or column labels for the data that's coming up in the next rows or paragraphs. The customer name, their street, city, state, zip, phone, name of their pet, and the genus of their pet, dog, cat, bird, and so forth. Each value separated by a comma, so the comma is the delimiter or separator character between values. And then begins the first row of real data, Sandy Oxfried. If there's missing data, for example, we don't have her zip code, then there would just be two commas back to back. Conversely, if there's a comma inside a value, in order for it to not be mistakenly interpreted as the delimiter character, those values get special treatment. They're wrapped in double quotes. So this is what a CSV value file or CSV data file looks like. And again, a lot of spreadsheet and database programs can export data in CSV format so that you can then turn and import them into the desired environment, which is what we're trying to do here with this file. We're going to import this customer data into our animal care database. Now, let me jump into customers and we'll drill into me, a particular customer. We saw that there was street, city, state, zip, address information here in our file that we're going to import, but we don't have those fields here in customer. In this database, we have customers in one table, but kind of above that, we've grouped our customers into households, where one household may have many members and as well many pets, many animals. And so, in my opinion, the data in this CSV file is going to fit better into our household table than into our customer table. Let me drill into a household record, and we can see that a household has a street, city, state, and zip values. So this is where we'll import our data. From file. Oh, let me point out also that this household title field has a validation rule, maybe a couple of rules set on it that disallow it from being empty and that ensure that it contains a unique value. Let's take a look at our manage database command and visit those validation rules, see how they're set and how they might impact an import. So I'll find that title field in the household table, click the options button for it. And we can see that over here in the validation tab, we have not empty and unique value. Like I said, this title field can never contain duplicate values, can't have two households with the same title, and it can never be empty. But we see also up above that these two rules are only being enforced during data entry and not always. Well, importing records does not qualify as during data entry. That phrase, you see that all the time in FileMaker. During data entry means manual human fingers on a keyboard entering data one character at a time, one field at a time, one record at a time. Whereas importing records or having a script make changes to data or using the replace field contents command, none of that would fall under this category of during data entry. We would have to switch over to always if we wanted to make sure that our imported data was run through this validation check to make sure that there were no empties and no uniques, and no duplicates. Now, if there were duplicates and we said always, and that could include either an existing record, we've got a few household records already here. If there was an imported record that matched the title exactly of one of those, that would be considered a duplicate. But likewise, if there were duplicates even just within this file, let's say that there were two customers that had the household name of Anne Green, this one might come in first and then the second one would be rejected. Okay, so when we have validation routines on and set to run always, what happens if a record fails validation? It is not included in the import, and the report at the end that says how many records were successfully added or updated will also tell you that there were X number of records that did not make it in, but it won't tell you which ones. It will not tell you which records did not come in. You'll have to go and figure that out yourself. What I do most of the time is I turn my validation rules to this setting before doing an import, and you'll have to do that field by field. Then I'll double check myself and say, well, I know that titles have to be unique and can't be empty. So after I've imported the data to make sure I got everything, then I'll go in and check for empties and then check for duplicates and fix them manually. At least that way, I know that they exist, that they got into the database, and that I've resolved the problem. Otherwise, you don't even know which ones didn't come in. Okay, I'll cancel out of here and cancel out of there, and we'll do our import. File, import records, over to File, and we'll navigate to the right folder, and there's that customers.csv file. We'll open it up, and the specify import order dialog box appears. The action menu appears immediately the first time, allowing you to either add new records, update existing records, or replace existing records. In this case, we're trying to add new household records. So I'll leave it at add. The first row of data of the 27 rows of data over here in the CSV file is field names. You can use these arrows to cycle through and see the actual rows of data that are about to come in. But I want to declare that that first row is field names. So we use this menu to do so. Say, use that first row as field names. Now it's able to say, oh, okay, your source fields are called this. The next job we have to do is to try to line up the target fields with the appropriate source fields. This menu here can go a long way if you happen to have names that match. And we do in this case. I'll choose matching names. And look at that, it matched up 5 of them and just left a few for us to do manually. Okay, so the name column, that's this first one with things like Sandy Oxfried and Kathy Mellon. We're going to have that go into the household title field there. And then the name of the pet, the name of their pet, their animal, and the genus, we're going to let those slide. So we're going to leave those set at don't import. Everything else looks good. So I'll click import, and we get 26 new household records. Fantastic. Now, Sandy Oxfried, she lives in Culver City. Well, I used to live in Culver City. I know the zip code there. Let's fill that in. We were missing her zip code from the source data. We pointed that out earlier, but I know that the zip code in Culver City, at least one of them, is 90230. And as I click away to try to commit that change, a script trigger fires when I try to commit that changed record. In a previous session of ours, number 9 actually, we learned about script triggers. And then a month later in session number 11, we wrote this scripted validation routine that checks for the existence of at least one related household member, one related customer record or household member record, and it checks for one related animal record for each household. Right? So whenever we create or edit a household record, that validation routine runs. Now, for obvious reasons, there's no point in having a household record if there are no people or animals living in that household. Now, that validation routine did not fire when we imported these records, only when I tried to make an edit to one of them. Why? Well, because that validation routine is associated with the layout and the on-record commit events that take place on that layout. And importing records and other batch operations like it do not interact with layouts in the same way that users do when making entries. So script triggers do not fire upon importing records. That's important to know about script triggers. We'll say okay there. And I'm going to have to revert this record in order for us to be able to go on. There we go. I'll lose the change to the zip code, but we'll add that back in later. So in other words, in order for these household records to be useful to us, we're going to need to add some household members, that is customer records that are related, at least one customer record related to each household, and likewise one animal record that's related to each household. We could write a script that loops through these household records, creating a new customer record, an animal record for each, but looping over a set of records can take a long time, especially if there are many records. Instead, let's get creative with the import command, which in comparison runs very quickly. We'll start with our customers. I'll jump over to the customer layout and drill into one of them. And what we're going to do here is we're going to import the same records, these records here, into the customer table. That'll create a new customer record for each household, right? We got 26 new household records. We likewise need 26 new customer records. We'll just have to figure a way to relate them, but more on that later. Before we import also, let's create a new temporary field where we can store the household title that's to be given to each customer. Because those household titles, like Sandy Oxreed, Kathy Mellon, John Squire, we can certainly use those to kind of calculate or derive the first name and the last name of each customer. So we'll come up here and into the manage database command. And in this customer table, let's create a new field. I'm going to prefix it with temp to remind me to delete it later. And we'll call it household title. Make it a text field and create and okay. All right, so we got this household title field and we're going to import now into it. File, import records, over to file, just like before, customers.csv, just like before. And for the import, we're trying to add new records to this customer table. We need to declare that the first row is our field names. And we're trying to take that name column and push its values into that temporary field, household title. The rest of these, from street all the way through genus, I'm going to go ahead and shift click here to select them all. We don't want to import any of them. So I'm just going to click on any one of those green buttons in the selected rows and say, don't import this field. That changes all of them. That's a nice shortcut. Click import. And we got 26 records added or updated. We can see that the household titles or customer names, according to the source data, have appeared in that temporary field. And now it's a pretty simple matter to grab the first name and the last name out of each of them. There are some of them where there's maybe a couple here, like Lemuel and Nissa Hampton. But let's say we just want to take the first name and use that as the first name field here, and the last word of the household title as the last name. So in the name first field, for all 26 of these records, we'll use replace field contents, and we'll replace with a calculated result that just grabs the leftmost word. Well, you can use the left words function for that. How many words do we want to grab? Just one. Out of what text? Out of that temporary household title field. This one down here. Shrink this up a little so we can see that. And we'll say OK and replace. And we've got our first names. Beautiful. It worked great. We'll do the same thing for last name. Replace field contents, but this time we'll grab the last word or the rightmost word. There, we want to grab just the last one word out of the temp household title field value. OK, and replace. And so now we've given each one of those new customers a good valid first name and last name. So far, so good. But next, we need to populate this foreign key field here, ID household. Now, what is supposed to go in this field? The name of the household? No, the ID number, right? This is a foreign key field. We're looking to use the ID number of the household. In fact, I'll go ahead and add a copy of this field to this layout so you can see what's really going on behind the scenes. It'll be the same field. I'll shrink it up a little bit, but I'll ask it to display as just an edit box instead of a pop-up menu. There. So we can see what's really in that field. Let me switch over to the records that have household record or household IDs assigned to them. We can see it's a 1 in there, or it's a 2 in there, right? The ID number of the household. So how in the world are we going to do that? We're trying to get for this customer, Sandy Oxfried, we're trying to get the ID number of that household record right there. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to create a makeshift relationship, one that would never be considered trustworthy or reliable under normal operating conditions, but it'll be temporary just for this purpose, okay? To make this more clear, I'm going to pop open a new window. And in this new window, let me switch into a household record. There we go. And we'll show all those household records. So we can see each household has a title, right? Let me get over to, there we go, Sandy Oxfried. The household has a title as well as street, city, state, zip, and phone. And the customer records over here have a household title that, because we just imported those two values from the exact same source, we know they match because I haven't tampered with them at all. So we can create a relationship from customer to household that says, all right, based on, or go and find the matching household record based on this value here, matching this value here. And then because of that relationship, we can reach over and say, all right, for this customer record, go and fetch the ID number that belongs to that household and stick it in this field. That's what we're going to do. Okay. So here we go. We'll build the relationship first. File, manage database. And into the relationships graph. Come down a little bit. We're trying to relate from customer to household. I already have one here, so I'm just going to option drag this to make a copy of it. That'd be the control key if I were on Windows. Control drag makes a copy. And we'll double click on this title bar and give this a better name, like customer household via household title. And then again, I'm going to remark to myself, this is temporary. I don't want to keep it around for long. And I'm even going to turn it bright red to draw my attention to it, like so that I know not to keep this and not to depend on it. And then the relationship is going to be from that title field in household to that temporary household title field in customer. There we go. I know that looks like a many-to-many, and indeed it is, because there's no validation routines on those fields. But again, this is just for temporary purposes. We're going to get rid of it as soon as the job is done. We'll say OK. And now watch this. We can go into that ID household field either here, or this one, we can get into it too. It's a little trickier because you have to click like you're going to choose something and then click away. The field stays active so that you can then say, all right, I want to use replace field contents to fill every record with an ID household. We're going to replace with a calculated result. We're going to reach across that relationship that we just built from customer to household that's related via the household titles. And we're going to say, all right, if you found a matching household title, then bring me back the ID number of that household. Boom. Okay. And replace. And look how beautifully that worked. We got household title down here as a temporary field, but the right household ID numbers have been placed into the foreign key field. So if you're careful, that can be a really useful strategy for filling foreign key fields. Now we also needed to add animal records so that each household had one or more animals assigned to it. And if you look back at our CSV file, we had as the last two columns, the name of their pet and the genus of their pet. So Charlie, the dog, Fluffy, the cat, Feathers, the bird, and so on. Okay, so we're going to bring that data in and put it into our animals table. We'll drill into one of those. There we go. And we're going to run into some similar problems though, because not only do we want the name of the animal, but we also want its genus ID, not the name of the genus, which we have in our CSV file, but the ID of the genus, and likewise the ID of the household. All right, well, so that we can do the same kind of trick that we used earlier on these two fields, let's create some temporary fields here in animal where we can capture the name of the household that the animal belongs in and the genus name, and then we'll use those in some makeshift relationships. Whoops, so I'll say a new field called temp household title, make that a text field, and likewise temp genus as a text field. And okay, and those two fields get added to the bottom of the layout. And now we'll do our import into the animal table from the same source file, that same CSV file, customers.csv. Right, we're trying to add records, not update or replace. We want to declare that first row of data as the field names or header row. We're going to bring the household name into that temporary household title field. We want to skip street through phone, so we'll select all of those with a shift click and then mark them to not be imported. And we're going to bring in the name of the pet and store it in the name field. That's the animal name field. And for genus, we'll store that in that temporary genus field as well so that we have it. That all looks good. And away we go. 26 new animal records. Okay, fantastic. So next, we'll set up some temporary relationships based on those text values. Again, you should hardly ever do this in real life, base relationships on text fields because they're so shifty, right? Users can go in and change them. But they will let us link over to genus and to household so we can put the proper ID numbers into those foreign key fields. Here on the relationships graph, under animal, we're trying to create two new relationships, one to genus, one to household. I happen to already have a couple here. And again, we'll just select them and option drag down to make copies. We'll give this one a better name of animal genus via genus title. And if I want to remind myself that it's temporary, I'll do that. And then we're going to relate from the title field here in genus to that temporary genus field that got filled. We can see it peeking out from behind here that got filled with the words dog, cat, bird, snake, and so forth. Okay, we'll collapse that one and do the same thing with the household table occurrence that I just added. We'll call that one via household title. And again, remind myself that it's meant to be temporary. And we'll relate from the title field in that table to that temporary household title field here. Collapse that, and then I'm going to make each of those bright red to draw attention to it later. There, as a reminder to delete it. And then we'll just do the same thing we did before. We use the good old replace field contents command to say, okay, take this word here and go and find it in the genus table. I can show you that really quickly. Let me pop open a new window. All right, find that in the genus table. And when you find a matching word, then bring back its corresponding ID number. Okay, so we'll go like we're going to make a selection here, but then click away, go to the replace field contents command, replace with a calculated result. We'll chase down that relationship from animal to genus through or using the genus title, and say grab the ID value out of that related record. Okay, and replace, and Charlie the dog gets marked as a dog, and Red the dog, and Fluffy the cat, and so it's all has worked beautifully. We'll do the same thing for household. Go like we're going to make an entry in there, click away from it, replace field contents, replace with calculated result, find that relationship that we made from animal to household via the household title, and say grab the ID number of that household and stuff it into this ID household foreign key field. Now we know to what household each animal belongs. Fantastic. Now we can get rid of those shaky, questionable table occurrences on the graph. We can get rid of those relationships and the 3 temporary fields that we used in support of them. So we'll select those 2 and shift click on this one and hit the delete key on the keyboard to remove those. And then likewise, we'll come over into fields and say, you know what, we don't need these temporary fields anymore. We'll delete those 2. And here in customer, we created one that we'll delete as well. Fantastic. That removes them from the layouts as well, so it cleans up the mess. Now, as we go back into customers and click into Sandy Oxfried and go to her household, I'll be able to enter that zip code finally, 90230, because there's a household member there's a customer record related to this household, and there's an animal record related to this household. So as I commit, the script trigger fires, it sees that everything's a-okay about our validation, and it lets it go through. Okay, nice. Let me show you another source file that we're going to be getting into. In this next import, we have some updated information about our doctors, our veterinarians, here in this Excel sheet. And we want to update names, phone numbers, and emails of existing vet records, as well as import any new vets that are on this list that aren't in the database already. So here we see that we've got 4 vet records. Notice the names Elizabeth and Ken, because they're going to change. And also notice that there are no email addresses entered yet, but we've got them over here. So to do an update kind of an import, you have to have some way to indicate the matching records. There needs to be something. In this case, it's going to be this ID field here, this ID column in Excel, that serves as a unique identifier that exists in both places. Some unique identifier. Now, you might be able to use email address, although that's shaky because people's email addresses change or they have multiple. ID numbers are the most reliable way to go, of course. But what we're about to do would not be possible without a unique identifier in each row. Also, you'd want to make sure that all the vet records are in the found set, because only records that are in the found set can be updated. So we'll go and import. We start the process like normal, like we did before. We'll find that vet's Excel file. But then the difference is we're going to change the action from add to update. And we're going to add this little option that says add remaining data as new records. So the update is going to try to find records in the database already in this table that match those coming in, and it will update the values in the fields we specify. But then any that are in the Excel sheet that aren't here in the FileMaker table will be added as new records. Like before, we want to declare the first row of data as field names. Okay, and then we're going to use this ID field here in the source and the ID field here in the target as the matching field. Because we chose the action of update, we now have a third option here on these green menus in the middle. We can say match records based on this field. And then we want the first name values to flow into our name first field, the last name values to flow into our name last field. Email and phone should come into email and phone respectively. There we go. We'll click import. And it tells us that 7 records were added or updated. And notice it used to be Elizabeth Moreno, it's now Liz. It used to be Ken Blackwood, it's now Kenneth. And we have 3 vet records that we didn't have before. And everybody got emails and updated phones as well. So that's how you do an update import. We also have some images here in this folder, this pet images folder. We have some images from our customers of their pets, and I named them carefully with the structure of the type of the animal, the genus of the animal, followed by an underscore, followed by the name of the animal, followed by .jpeg, right? So I followed that naming convention consistently. We can see that there. And when you try to import a folder full of images, you're going to use another update kind of an import like we did with the vets, right? But there aren't ID numbers associated with images. So we'll have to use the image file names, which in this case, fortunately, are unique. What we'll need to do, though, is in the database, in the animal table particularly, is we'll need to create some field that has values in it that's like these image file names. Well, we can do that pretty easily. We know what genus each animal is, and we have the name of each animal as well. So let's go and create a new field. File manage database. We'll call this new field, let's call it temp, because we're going to get rid of it when we're done with it, image file name, and we'll make it a calculated field. Okay. We're going to want the genus of the animal first, and we can get the title of that genus from this related table here with that field. And then we'll use ampersand to say join or concatenate to the end of that an underscore character, which must be wrapped in quotes. All literal strings of characters have to be wrapped in quotes. Then what followed next was the name of the animal, and that's over here in the animal table. There it is, the name field. And then we needed .jpeg. So ampersand quote .jpg end quote. That calculation should return textual data, not numbers. So we'll want to make sure we change that to text, and we'll say okay and okay. And we can see that new field, dog charlie.jpg, dog red.jpg, cat fluffy.jpg. Now we want to try to update images for all of these animals. So I'll definitely want to come over here and say show all animals, so that if we do have a picture of animals that weren't part of that recent import, they would be able to be updated as well. Don't worry that the first letter of the file names here is lowercase and the first letter of our temporary image file name is uppercase. This update matching mechanism is not case sensitive. All right, here we go. To import a batch of images, you go like you're going to import records, but then you turn right here and choose folder instead of file. Choose folder instead of file. You specify where the images are, there in the pet images folder. And then you tell it whether you're importing pictures and movies or text files. We're importing pictures and movies, but we don't want to import only a reference. I want to fully embed these images into the database. There we go. We'll need to set the import action to update. Okay. And then we don't have that field name business because we're not importing text of data. But what we want to do is come over here and say, all right, for the file name of each image, we'd like to try to match that up with that temporary image file name field. Notice that it's down here under a heading of for matching only. Because it's a calculated field, you can't import data into a calculated field. You can only use it for matching. So they kind of drop all of those calc fields down to the bottom of the list so they're not as enticing when we're choosing our fields in which to import. And you see how immediately it assumed, oh, okay, that's your match field. Got it. Now the image itself, we want that to land in our photo field. And so we'll choose photo with the import action appropriately assigned there. And we'll say import. And we had 9 images in the folder, and it looks like all 9 records were successfully found There they are. Fantastic. What a fast way to get images in. If there's any way to do it, that beats dragging them in one by one for sure. Now we're going to import some rather messy data. Let me open up this Excel workbook involving foreign key values into our visits table. Okay, so here we've got 5,000 rows of visits from 2016 on to fairly recent. And let's take a look at the visit table of the database, see what it needs. I'll jump into a detail record. Okay, so the date of the visit, no problem. The beginning time and ending time of the visit, no problem. We've got all that right here, right? Date, time begin, time end, no sweat. That's where the problems begin though. Notice we want the ID number of the animal. What do we have? We've got the names of the animals. Next, we want the ID number of the customer. What do we have? We've got the names of the customers. Well, I've already shown you the approach of filling foreign key fields after importing by creating some makeshift relationships, and then in the replace field contents command, reaching across those relationships to grab the related key value. This time, we'll add the foreign key values to the Excel sheet as new columns, which admittedly makes it easier to visualize what's really happening behind the scenes, though it does require some skill with Excel. Okay. Now, since ID animal is the first one that we're trying to fill on this layout, we'll start with animals. We're going to need a list of all of our animal records with IDs in the Excel format to use in our lookup formulas. So let's jump over to animals. We'll do a show all animal records. So we get all 39 of them. And let's do an export here of all these animal records that, that will include the ID number. And then, well, we really need something that combines the genus of the animal and the name of the animal in case there happen to be two animals with the same name. Who knows? There could be Fido the dog and Fido the cat. And so we'll end up creating a calculation field here. Let's call it genus underscore name that creates a somewhat unique value of let's say quote underscore ampersand and then the name of the animal. There creates a somewhat unique, perhaps, reference to that animal, right? The dog whose name is Pendergrass, I'll autofill that down through the next 5,000 rows, the cat whose name is Boots, and so forth. And we'll do the same thing in FileMaker, create an identical field here in the FileMaker animal table. So file, manage, database. We already have this temporary image file name field that's got everything we want, but with an extra .jpg tagged onto the end. Why don't we just repurpose that one? Absolutely. Let's call this one temp genus and then animal. Okay. We'll change the name. We'll change the formula to exclude that .jpg that was tacked onto the end. There we go. We'll just get the genus title underscore name, exactly like I built in the Excel sheet. And there we go. Okay. So now we're ready to export the animal data so that we can then do a lookup for the ID numbers over there in Excel. Export records. And let's export it to an Excel file. That's going to be useful. We'll tell it that we want it to be automatically opened up when ready. And we'll call it animals, and we'll put it into the source data folder in a new folder called exports. There. Okay. When you export as an Excel file, you get the option of naming the worksheet and giving some other metadata, but I'm just going to leave those at their defaults for now. And we want to include the ID number of the animal and that temporary genus name, animal name combination field. We'll say export, and Excel or FileMaker creates that Excel file, gives it to us there. There we go. Fantastic. Now, in the visit worksheet that we're going to eventually try to import from into FileMaker, let's create a lookup field that we can use to grab the animal ID. We'll create the column name animal ID, and then there's a relatively new function in Excel called XLOOKUP that is just brilliant. It beats VLOOKUP hands down. XLOOKUP says, okay, what do you want me to go and look for? Well, I want you to go and look for this value right here, and then I'll type a comma, and then it asks, all right, where do you want me to go and look for it? In what array or in what list? I'll switch over into the animals workbook that's open, and we'll say, look for that name in this range right here, and I'll use Command Shift down arrow to select that whole range, and I'll type a comma. And then it asks, okay, well, if I find one, what array, what list of data contains the piece that you want brought back? Well, I want the ID number, so the corresponding animal name brought back. So I'm going to select that range there. So in other words, if we were looking for cat Bubbles in this range, it would say, well, I found it on the third row. And so then it would march over to the third row of the return array and bring back the corresponding value from there. That's what XLOOKUP does. I'll finish it off with a right parenthesis. All the other three arguments are optional. So then I'll hit return, and we got animal number 20 for the dog named Pendergrass, and we'll autofill that down. So XLOOKUP can look either to the right or to the left of the key value, which VLOOKUP cannot. It's absolutely brilliant, just brilliant. All right, I'll save that. We're going to do the same thing for genus and room and vet and customer, right? Well, at least room and customer. I think we'll be okay from there. Go back over to FileMaker, and let's jump into our room layout, and we'll export those records. We'll export them out as an Excel file called rooms into the exports folder. That's good. And we want the ID number of the room and the title of the room. Perfect. And that opens up into Excel, and we get exactly what we're hoping for. And then we'll switch back over into visits, and we'll create a room ID column here. For room ID, we'll say XLOOKUP, go and find that room name, looking through the column of room names here. I'll type a comma to move on to the next argument, and bringing back the corresponding ID number for the room name that you found. I'll type a closing right parenthesis and hit return, and it's done it. And I'll copy that formula down to the end. Beautiful. We'll do the same thing for customers. Okay, let me switch over into FileMaker, and we need to export all 35 of our customers. So we'll say show all and export. Okay, now we had full names in the customer column in Excel for our customers there. That's fine. We actually have a full name column in FileMaker already, so I don't need to create that. It already exists. We'll call this one customers. Good, good. And we want to grab the ID number as well as the name full value for the customers. Notice that I had to switch into this choice current table from the menu because the ID number field wasn't on the current layout. So it's important to know that you can do that, that you can jump into the whole table full of fields, or even into related tables and include related fields in your export. All right, let's export that customer data. That opens up, looks great. We'll switch back into visits and create a customer ID field here where we'll use XLOOKUP, never get tired of it, and say find that customer's name, comma, in this range of cells from there down to the bottom to there, comma, and bring back the corresponding value within that range. You notice that I'm being very careful to select the same height of ranges for each of the two. If your lookup array and your return array are of different sizes, you've done it wrong. Okay, I just typed the closing right parenthesis. Now I'll hit the return key. We get customer ID number 16 for Terry Fenn, and we'll autofill that down through the next 5,000 rows. Now, what did I do wrong? Let's see. Kim and Jen Europe. Oh, I know what I did wrong. That's because I changed the exercise at the very last minute, and I didn't think that bit through. Some of these, the customer names that have more than one first person's name in them, I should have used a different calculation, and I didn't. All right, I'm going to overlook that for right now. Sorry about that. If the customer names had over here in FileMaker been full first and last, well, first and the partner and last, then this would have worked great. Rats, sorry about that. All right, well, most of these will come out just fine. We'll have to manage the others by exception. And then lastly, the vet ID. Now, in the vet workbook that we already worked on, we have first name column and a last name column. Let's create a full name column here. And we'll create a little concatenation formula that says equals first name, ampersand, quote, space, quote, ampersand, last name there. So we can get full names of these vets. Got it. We'll save that. And we have the full names of the vets who served in each visit here. So then we can easily say, all right, let's calculate vet ID using, once again, X lookup, saying search for the vet name here, search for it in this column of data here. And if you find it, I'll type a comma to move on to the next argument, then bring back the corresponding data from, or bring back the data from the corresponding row in this array or this range right here. There we go, right parenthesis, return. We get the vet number, we'll copy that down through the next rows, and we are golden. All right, we'll save the changes to that. And now we're ready to import into FileMaker. We'll go back into visits, like so. So you can see why I say that this approach lets you see really what's going on behind the scenes more, because you're seeing the foreign key field values in the source data before you do the import. Let's see how it works. I know, despite my my problems with the few, but we'll say import records, and we're importing in from visits. Okay, we're trying to do an add action where we're adding new records. We want to declare the first row is field names. And then let's take advantage of that matching names technique that we saw earlier. That gets us some of the way, right? And then the source fields of customer, animal, genus, room, vet, that's all garbage because those are words, right? We can see that as we go along here, and we see, yeah, Terry, Fenn, and Penn. Yeah, we don't want that. We want to use the IDs. So we'll come down here and say, well, all right, animal ID lines up with ID animal. Send the room ID into our ID room field. Customer ID in Excel goes to the ID customer field in FileMaker, and vet ID lands in the ID vet field in FileMaker. That looks good. As we say import, we'll get 5,000 rows. Look at how fast that goes. Importing 5,000 records took a couple of seconds at most, and all of our foreign key values have been filled in, with the exception of those that I messed up like this, and so those would have to be handled manually. But that's a pretty realistic scenario as well, because your Excel data puts very little constraint on what people enter into Excel. So you will end up with some records that you're going to have to manage by exception. Okay, one more thing I want to show you in this session on importing and exporting, and that is exporting grouped data. We've got 35 customers. Most of them are from, most of their households, I should say, are from California, I think all of them, but they're from different cities. And let's say for marketing purposes, we wanted to see a list of all of the cities from which our customers came, okay? Now, let's do this. Let's do a find and say, only find records where there's something. You can use the asterisk as the wildcard to say, find records where there's something in that city field. And we see that 30 out of 31 records have something in the city field. And if we sort these household records, hit the sort button. If we sort them by that city field, and then maybe we'll do a secondary sort by the household title. As we flip through them, we can see Anaheim, Burbank, Carson, Culver City. Oh, a couple from Culver City. Okay, good. Probably a bunch from Long Beach. Right, bunch from Long Beach. But we only want Long Beach to appear once in this export of records that we're doing. Likewise, any other city for which we have multiple households from that city, we only want it to appear once in the export. Well, we can export grouped data. To do that, you pull up the found set that you want, as we just did. You sort the records by the field that you want grouped upon, like we just did. Then you do your export. Okay, we'll go out as an Excel file again, just to make it easy. And we'll call this customer cities and put it in the exports folder. There and there. And because we've got the data sorted, we get this extra little bit right here. Okay, let's say we want to include the city field in our export, but we want to group by city. What that means is, well, first of all, if we didn't check that, then it would export one city row for every household record. We get 30 rows in the export. On the other hand, if we turn on group by city, then it's only going to export the first household record for each unique city value. And if there were 6 Long Beach household records, only the first one would be exported, and it would skip the next 5 and move on to the next household record that had a unique city name. That's what the grouping business does here when you export. Again, you had to sort first before you come to your export command. I'll go ahead and export, and the Excel file will open up, and we'll see that indeed it gave us a nice, that's more wide than it needs to be, it gave us a nice list of just the unique cities. There, Long Beach appears only once. All right, so that's how you can export grouped data, or summarized, if you will, summarized data. Okay, so there we are. Are there any questions about what we looked at today? I know I went a little bit long, but I want to give you time for questions if you have any.